Syria has endured 7 years of war, and in recent weeks it seems to have been getting worse. There have been airstrikes in eastern Ghouta, fighting in Idlib, and now Turkey's operation in Afrin. I'm Andrew Hopkins, and this is TRT World's One-on-One Express with Ramesh Rajasingham, the UN's Deputy Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for the Syria crisis. Now, Jan Egeland, the UN Special Advisor, he said that 15,000 people have come to Afrin city, and also the local authorities there are stopping people from trying to escape from the fighting. What's your assessment of what's going on there and what can be done at the moment?
Certainly. I mean, in Afrin we don't have the same sort of access that we have in Idlib and other parts of Aleppo, where we have a massive humanitarian program. These figures that we arrive at are basically looking at the situation, looking at the conflict, with the experience and history and understanding of what's happened elsewhere in Syria. So in most cases, when you have conflict, which is the biggest driver of displacement in Syria, by the way, as the conflict approaches civilian areas, those populations tend to flee before the conflict actually comes into the area. So based on this, we would estimate, we can't give a precise figure, but we would estimate somewhere between 10 to 15,000 may have been displaced.
Now, last year, some de-escalation zones were set up in Syria through the Astana process, through Russia, Turkey and Iran, and the UN had praised those zones. What's it like there at the moment? Because it feels like in some areas there's an increase in fighting. What's your assessment of what's going on there?
Well, I don't think we praised it in the first place. I think we did notice, and we were glad to notice that there was a decrease in violence in those areas, which led to more access and programming support to the affected population there. But the UN was not a part of that agreement. And we did notice that there were some issues that could lead to a possible problem in the future. And this is what we are seeing now in Idlib. And in fact, we're quite disappointed because those areas that were supposed to be deconflicted, or where you would have de-escalation, you would have a population that would have an expectation that their life would improve because of the drop in violence, the drop in airstrikes and things like that. And any father, mother would want that, because you don't want your children to suffer the problems anyone would face in a conflict. Unfortunately, since the 15th of December of 2017, just a couple of months back, to today, we've seen 300,000 newly displaced persons, mainly from these de-escalated areas, as the government of Syria has made a military push on these areas. So these expectations that the people had that life may return to some semblance of normalcy has actually gone the opposite way around. And today, if you look at Syria, the biggest, or the largest, the highest levels of violence and fighting in the country are in the de-escalated areas, in Idlib and in eastern Ghouta, which is in rural Damascus.
What's the humanitarian situation like in Syria now compared with maybe 1 or 2 years ago? Is it better or worse?
Last year at this time, in December of last year, December 2016, Aleppo fell, eastern Aleppo fell under the control of the government. And that was a particularly traumatic period, because many thousands were displaced, they'd lost their belongings, there'd been incessant fighting in that area, and many had been killed, civilians. And we thought we were having a really difficult humanitarian crisis there. It's regretful to say, and actually, that today, 1 year on, the situation's far worse. And as I've explained, we've had 300,000 people displaced in a couple of months. This figure we didn't see last year. This year's figure is far higher than last year. Many of our partners who were supporting the vulnerable people in Idlib now themselves are displaced, because they have had to move with the populations as they left these areas of fighting. So when the aid worker becomes vulnerable himself or herself, we face an added problem, an exacerbated problem, because you need to strengthen their capacity as well. So yes, I would say the situation is far worse than this time last year.